Previously on, She Saved a Dying Wolf. Part 2. Maya Karen saved a dying wolf, and discovered he was Kale Blackthorn, the Alpha King who'd been searching for her for a decade. But his love was manipulation, a plan to cage her silver flame power and turn her into a weapon. Years before, Maya had loved Marcus Silvermoon. Some knew him as Festus, though those closest to him called him by his birth name. When she'd healed him from silver poisoning, her power awakened the dire wolf bloodline in his blood, transforming him into a monster that killed 16 innocent wolves before his own father was forced to end his life. For that tragedy, Maya was exiled, branded as cursed and dangerous. When Maya discovered Kale's betrayal, she shattered his hold on her mind, and when the Devourer of Lights, an ancient entity of pure entropy, threatened to consume all reality, she made an impossible choice: save the world that rejected her, or let it burn. 20 wolves chose complete vulnerability, tearing down every wall to create a bond strong enough to rebuild the ancient seals. But the prison needed an anchor, someone to hold it together from inside the void forever. Kale sacrificed himself, proving he'd finally learned what love meant, but his sacrifice was killing him, slowly erasing his consciousness. Maya faced another impossible choice: let him fade, or give up half her existence to save him. She chose connection, split her soul between worlds, and together, existing in both the physical realm and the void, they maintained the seal that kept the Devourer caged. 6 months later, Maya built the Sanctuary of the Silver Flame, a school for the rejected, teaching broken wolves to transform wounds into wisdom. But then something else began testing the seal. Not the Devourer, but something worse. Something that had been watching, learning, waiting. The Corruptor. An entity that doesn't erase connection. It twists it, turns love into obsession, vulnerability into manipulation, everything beautiful about bonds into weapons that destroy from within. And it's been studying Maya's 20-soul web, learning exactly how to unravel everything they built. If you're just joining us, and haven't watched parts 1 and 2, go back now. This finale will hit completely different when you know the full journey. And if you're returning, welcome to the end. Hit subscribe if you haven't, because this is the conclusion you've been begging for since that part 2 cliffhanger. Before we dive into part 3, I want to let you know that the story continues beyond this video. I've written a full-length novel called After the Corruptor that picks up 10 years after this ending, exploring what happens when a new entity attacks the very foundation of understanding itself. If you want more after this trilogy concludes, the link is in the description. But for now, let's finish Maya's immediate journey. Now, let's finish this. Here's Chapter 1. The nightmare started on a Tuesday. Maya was teaching her 3rd class of the day, 15 students ranging from teenagers to middle-aged wolves, all learning to channel their pain into healing power, when the first scream tore through the sanctuary. Through her divided consciousness, Maya felt it simultaneously in both the physical world and the void, a wrongness that made reality itself recoil, not the cold emptiness of the Devourer, but something hot and invasive, like poison spreading through veins. Kale, she sent urgently through their connection. Do you feel that? Yes. His presence in the void had gone tense, protective. It started. The Corruptor is making its move. Maya dismissed her class with a sharp gesture and ran toward the source of the screaming, her students following despite her orders to stay back. What she found in the sanctuary's eastern courtyard made her blood run cold. Dane, one of the original 20 who'd bonded to seal the Devourer, was on his knees in the center of the garden, clawing at his own chest, as if trying to tear something out. But it wasn't a physical wound causing his agony. Through the bond connecting all 20 souls, Maya could see what was happening to him. The threads of connection that linked him to the others, threads that should have glowed with silver light, were turning black, corrupting, twisting from sources of strength into chains that burned. Make it stop, Dane gasped, his eyes wild with pain that was more psychological than physical. I can feel them all. Alpha Silvermoon, Sarah, everyone. But it's wrong. The connection is wrong. It's suffocating me. drowning me. I can't." He screamed again, and through the bond, Maya felt it ripple outward, felt the other 19 souls connected to their web, suddenly experiencing the same invasion of wrongness. It's attacking the bonds themselves. Kale sent from the void, his mental voice carrying horror. "Maya, it's not trying to break the seal. It's trying to corrupt it, turn our greatest strength into our worst weakness." Maya dropped to her knees beside Dane and placed her hands on his chest, channeling silver flame directly into the infected connection points. But the moment her power touched the corrupted threads, she felt it, the corruptor's presence, vast and terrible and intimately aware of her. "Hello, little flame," a voice whispered through the bond, layered with harmonics that made her want to vomit. "I've been watching you, studying you, learning everything about these precious connections you've built." The voice was nothing like the Devourer's, where the void entity had been cold and empty. This was hot and invasive. It didn't want to erase connection. It wanted to possess it, pervert it, make it into something poisonous. "You think bonds make you strong," the corruptor continued, and Maya felt its attention focusing on the threads linking her to Kale across dimensions. "Let me show you what connection really means when it's taken to its logical conclusion." Before Maya could shield herself, the corruptor's power surged through her link to Kale. For one horrifying moment, she felt their connection, which had been built on choice, on conscious vulnerability, on love, twist into something else entirely. Suddenly she couldn't tell where she ended, and Kale began. His thoughts became hers, his emotions overwhelming her own consciousness. The beautiful intimacy they'd built turned claustrophobic, suffocating, like being buried alive in someone else's identity. "This is what you wanted, isn't it?" the corruptor purred. "Perfect unity, complete understanding, to never be alone again. Well, congratulations, now you'll never be separate again either. You'll drown in each other, until there's nothing left of who you were individually." Maya screamed and threw up shields of silver flame, desperately trying to restore boundaries between herself and Kale. Through the void, she felt him doing the same, both of them fighting to reclaim their individual identities, while maintaining enough connection to hold the seal. When she finally managed to push back the corruptor's influence, Maya was left gasping, her physical body soaked with sweat, while her ethereal form in the void trembled with aftershock. "Are you okay?" Kale sent, his mental voice shaken but distinctly his own again. "No," Maya replied honestly. "That was what we could become if we're not careful. If connection stops being a choice and becomes a prison instead." Around her in the physical world, the other students had backed away in terror. Dane had stopped screaming, but lay curled in a fetal position, whimpering, and through the bond connecting all 20 souls, Maya felt panic spreading like wildfire. Because they'd all felt it. All experienced that moment, when beautiful connection twisted into parasitic possession, and now they were terrified of the very bonds that had saved reality just months ago. "That's its strategy." Elder Marcus's voice came through the connection, ancient and grim. "It's not trying to destroy us. It's trying to make us destroy ourselves, make us so afraid of our bonds being corrupted, that we sever them voluntarily. But if we sever the bonds," Alpha Silver Moon added, "the seal falls apart, the devourer breaks free." Exactly, the corruptor's voice whispered through their collective consciousness, pleased with itself. "You're trapped, little flames. Maintain the connections and watch me twist them into weapons that tear you apart from within, or sever them and let the void consume everything. Either way, I win." Maya forced herself to stand on shaking legs, her students watching her with a mixture of fear and desperate hope. "Listen to me," she said, her voice carrying to everyone present, and through the bond to the other 19 souls scattered across the territories. "What just happened to Dane? What we all felt, that's the corruptor's opening move. It wants us afraid of our own bonds, wants us to believe that connection is dangerous." "But it is dangerous," one of her students said, a young woman named Rhea, who'd been rejected by 3 different packs before finding the sanctuary. "I felt it too through the residual energy. That thing can turn love into obsession, trust into chains." How do we fight something that weaponizes the very thing we're teaching people to embrace? Maya looked at the terrified faces around her and realized this was the real test, not physical battle or cosmic confrontation, but whether they could hold on to faith in connection when connection itself had become a potential threat. "Kale," she sent through their link, "I need your help. I need you to help me show them that connection and corruption aren't the same thing, that we can maintain bonds without letting them consume us." "How?" Kale asked, his presence in the void moving closer to hers. "The corruptor is right about one thing. Taken to its extreme, connection does become possession. So how do we teach the difference?" Maya closed her eyes and reached for the answer, feeling her way through the problem with the same intuition that had guided her through healing impossible wounds. Boundaries, she realized. The corruptor can only corrupt connection that has no boundaries. But healthy bonds, real love, they require both intimacy and autonomy, both unity and individuality. She opened her eyes and addressed her students again, speaking with growing certainty. The corruptor showed us connection without boundaries, total unity where individual identity drowns. But that's not what we've been building here. Real connection requires two things to coexist: vulnerability and sovereignty, intimacy and autonomy. Through the bond, she felt the other 19 souls tuning in, listening. "You can be deeply connected to someone and still be your own person," Maya continued. "You can share your wounds and your strength without losing yourself in another's identity. That's the difference between healthy bonds and corruption. One honors both individuals, the other consumes them." Pretty words. The corruptor's voice mocked through the connection. But can you actually practice what you preach? Can you maintain boundaries while holding a seal that requires perfect unity? Can you be intimate without drowning? Can you be vulnerable without being consumed? Maya felt the challenge in those words, felt the corruptor preparing its next attack, and through her divided consciousness, one part standing in the sanctuary, another part existing in the void with Kale, she understood what was coming. The entity was going to force them to prove their philosophy, was going to attack every bond in the 20-soul web, and make them choose over and over again, connection or safety, vulnerability or survival, love or self-preservation. "It's going to be a war of attrition," Kale sent grimly, "every day, every hour, testing the bonds until we break. Then we teach everyone how to fight back," Maya replied, "starting now." She turned to her students, to Dane still recovering on the ground, to the terrified faces of wolves who'd come here believing they'd found safety. "The corruptor wants a war? Fine, we'll give it one, but not with teeth and claws. We're going to fight with the one thing it can't corrupt: conscious, boundaried, healthy connection, and we're going to teach every wolf in these territories how to do the same." "You have no idea what you're up against," the corruptor whispered. Maya smiled, fierce and unafraid. "Neither do you." And somewhere in the void between worlds, the real battle for the soul of connection itself was about to begin. Chapter 2: Teaching Resistance. By dawn the next day, every wolf bonded to the seal was experiencing the same symptoms. Maya stood in the sanctuary's great hall, a space that had once been a weapons armory, but now served as their largest classroom, and looked at the faces of the 19 souls who'd helped her cage the devourer. They'd come when she'd called, abandoning territories and responsibilities to gather here because the alternative was facing the corruptor's attacks alone. Alpha Silvermoon looked like he'd aged a decade overnight, the corruption in his bonds manifesting as paranoia that everyone connected to him was trying to control his thoughts. Sarah couldn't stop crying, the twisted connection making every emotion from the other 19 feel like it was drowning her own feelings. Elder Marcus had isolated himself in a corner, terrified that opening himself to the group would result in losing what remained of his individual identity. And through it all, Maya felt her own connection to Kale straining under the corruptor's constant pressure. Every moment, she had to consciously maintain boundaries between where she ended and he began, fighting against the entity's attempts to blur those lines until they both dissolved into some nightmarish merged consciousness. "How are you holding up?" she sent to Kale through their carefully maintained link. Barely, he admitted from the void. It's like trying to hold onto yourself while someone's constantly trying to erase the line between self and other. Maya, I understand now why this might be worse than the devourer. At least emptiness is honest. This pretends to be intimacy while actually being invasion. Maya nodded. Even though he couldn't see the gesture from the void, that was exactly the insidiousness of the corruptor's attack. It weaponized the very thing that had saved them, making healthy connection feel dangerous. All right, Maya said aloud, calling the group to attention. I know you're all suffering. I know every bond feels like it's burning from the inside out, but we're not going to survive this by cutting off our connections or by letting them consume us. Then, what do we do? Dane asked, his voice raw from yesterday's screaming, because right now, every time I feel one of you through the bond, I can't tell if it's real connection or the corruptor's corruption. How do I know the difference? It was the question they were all thinking. Maya could feel it through the web, and she had an answer, but they weren't going to like it. We learn to feel the difference, Maya said. We train ourselves to recognize what healthy connection feels like versus what corruption feels like, and we do it by practicing over and over until we can maintain intimacy without losing sovereignty. That's insane. One of Kale's warriors, a wolf named Thomas, protested. You're asking us to deliberately expose ourselves to the very thing that's trying to destroy us? No, Maya corrected. I'm asking you to learn the difference between a bond that honors both individuals and one that consumes them. The corruptor can only corrupt connection that has no boundaries, so we're going to build boundaries while maintaining intimacy. She could see the skepticism in their faces, feel their fear through the web. They wanted her to have an easier answer, a way to fight that didn't require more vulnerability, when vulnerability felt like suicide. Show them, Kale sent from the void. Show them what healthy bounded connection looks like versus corruption. Maya took a breath and opened herself to the demonstration. Through the bond connecting all 20 souls, she let them feel her connection to Kale, not as an abstract concept, but as a living reality. They felt the intimacy between them, the deep knowing that came from sharing consciousness across dimensions. But they also felt something else, the clear boundaries that allowed Maya to be Maya and Kale to be Kale, even while being profoundly connected. This is what it feels like, Maya said, holding the demonstration steady. Intimacy with autonomy, unity with individuality. I know Kale, deeply, know his thoughts, his fears, his love, but I'm not drowning in him. I'm still myself, and he's still himself, and we exist both together and separate. Then, deliberately, she showed them the alternative. She let the corruptor's influence touch the connection for just a moment, and everyone in the room gasped as they felt the difference. The corruption felt similar to healthy connection at first, the same intensity, the same closeness. But where healthy bonds left room for both individuals to exist, corruption erased boundaries until there was no distinction between self and other. It was intimacy taken to a pathological extreme, becoming not connection but consumption. Maya slammed her shields back into place, cutting off the demonstration before anyone could be damaged by it. That's the difference, she said, breathing hard from the effort of that controlled exposure. Feel it, remember it, because the corruptor is going to keep attacking, and you need to be able to recognize when your bonds are being corrupted versus when they're just being tested. But how do we fight back? Sarah asked, wiping tears from her face. Even if we can recognize corruption, how do we stop it from taking over? Maya walked to the center of the hall and gestured for them all to stand. We practice boundaries, she said. Not walls. Walls cut off connection entirely. Boundaries are different. They're permeable membranes that let intimacy flow while protecting individual sovereignty. She had them form pairs, each duo connected through the 20-soul web, but not yet deeply familiar with each other's internal landscapes. I want you to practice feeling each other through the bond, Maya instructed. But I also want you to practice maintaining your sense of self while being open. It's like being in a conversation, where you're fully present and listening, but you're not abandoning your own perspective in the process. The exercise seemed simple, but within minutes, Maya could feel several pairs struggling. The habit of either completely closing off or completely merging was so ingrained that finding the middle ground felt impossible. Alpha Silvermoon, Maya called to the struggling Alpha. What are you feeling right now? Panic, he admitted. Every time I open to Thomas through the bond, I feel like I'm going to lose myself in his consciousness, so I keep slamming shut, but then I'm completely isolated, and the bond hurts from the strain. That's because you're thinking in binary terms, Maya said, either completely open or completely closed. But there's a third option, open with boundaries. Let me show you. She stepped between Alpha Silvermoon and Thomas, placing one hand on each of their shoulders. Through her touch, she demonstrated what she meant, a connection that flowed freely, but with clear limits, like a river with banks, that guided the water without damming it entirely. Feel that? Maya asked. That's what we're aiming for. Connection that honors both the relationship and the individuals within it. Slowly, painfully, they began to learn. Sierra discovered she could feel others' emotions without drowning in them, if she remembered to check in with her own feelings first. Elder Marcus realized he could share wisdom without having his identity consumed, if he maintained awareness of his own thoughts separate from the collective. Dane learned to open to others' pain without taking it on as his own. It was exhausting work, requiring constant vigilance and practice. But gradually, Maya felt the 20-soul web stabilizing. The bonds were still under attack from the corruptor, but now they had a framework for resistance. It's working, Kale sent from the void, wonder in his mental voice. The corruption is still probing, but it can't get the same grip when everyone's maintaining conscious boundaries. Don't celebrate yet, Maya replied. This was just the first lesson. The corruptor is going to adapt, find new ways to attack. We need to. Her words cut off as reality itself seemed to shudder. Through her divided consciousness, Maya felt something massive shift in the void. The corruptor wasn't just probing the bonds anymore, it was preparing for a direct assault. And it was bringing reinforcements. Maya, Kale's voice carried urgency that bordered on panic. You need to see this. Look through my eyes in the void. Maya shifted more of her awareness to her ethereal form, seeing through Kale's perspective in the space between worlds. What she saw made her blood freeze. The corruptor wasn't alone anymore. Around it, dozens of smaller entities were gathering, fragments of itself, or perhaps entirely new beings drawn by its presence. Each one pulsed with the same invasive energy, the same hunger to twist connection into consumption. And they were all moving toward the seal, toward the 20-soul web, like sharks circling wounded prey. How many? Maya sent, her physical body in the great hall going rigid with shock. At least 30, Kale replied. Maybe more. Maya, if they all attack at once, the bonds won't hold. Maya finished grimly. We'll have to sever them to survive. And then the devourer breaks free. Through the physical world, she felt the other 19 souls registering the same terrible understanding. They'd learned to resist one corruptor's attacks. But 30? We need reinforcements, Alpha Silvermoon said, his alpha instincts kicking in despite his exhaustion. Every wolf who understands what we're teaching, every pack that's willing to help. Won't be enough, Elder Marcus interrupted. These entities aren't physical threats. They're attacking consciousness itself. More wolves means more potential victims, not more defenders. Then what do we do? Sierra's voice broke on the question. Maya looked around at the exhausted, terrified faces of the 19 souls who'd already sacrificed so much. Then she felt Kale's presence in the void, steady and strong, despite the gathering threat. And she made a decision that would either save them all or doom them forever. We go on the offensive, Maya said quietly. We stop defending and start attacking. If the corruptor wants to corrupt connection, we're going to show it what happens when connection fights back. Maya, what are you planning? Kale sent, concern threading through his words. Something dangerous, she replied. Something that might save us or might give the corruptor exactly what it wants. She turned to address the group. "We're going to do what the first ones never did," Maya announced. "We're going to take the fight to the enemy. Tomorrow we enter the void, all 20 of us, and we face the corruptor on its own ground." The silence that followed was deafening. Then Alpha Silvermoon stepped forward. "If we do this, some of us might not come back." "I know," Maya said. "And if we fail, the seal falls and the devourer breaks free." "I know that too." The Alpha studied her face for a long moment, then nodded. "Then we'd better not fail." Through the void, Maya felt the 30 corruption entities drawing closer, and she wondered if she'd just made the biggest mistake of her life. Chapter 3: Into Enemy Territory. They had one night to prepare for what might be a suicide mission. Maya stood on the sanctuary's highest tower, as sunset painted the sky in shades of blood and gold, watching her students, and the 19 souls connected to her moving through the courtyard below. Some were saying goodbye to loved ones, others were meditating, preparing their minds for the journey into the void. A few were simply sitting together in silence, drawing strength from physical proximity before they'd have to face horrors beyond physical reality. "Are you afraid?" Kale's voice came through their connection, soft and intimate. "Terrified," Maya admitted. "I'm about to lead 19 people into the void to fight entities made of corrupted consciousness. Half of us might not come back. And if we fail, the devourer breaks free and erases everything." "But you're doing it anyway," Kale observed. "Because the alternative is watching the corruptor slowly destroy us from within until we sever the bonds ourselves," Maya replied. "At least this way, we're choosing how we fight." She felt his pride and fear mixing together through their link, felt him holding space for both emotions without letting either consume him. They'd both gotten better at maintaining boundaries while staying connected, practice born of necessity as the corruptor's attacks had intensified throughout the day. "I wish I could be there with you in physical form," Kale sent, "fighting beside you instead of just supporting from the void." "You'll be there in the way that matters," Maya said. "Your consciousness will anchor us when we cross over. And Kale, if this goes wrong, if the corruption takes me—" "It won't," he interrupted fiercely. "I won't let it." "But if it does," Maya insisted, "you need to promise me something. Don't let your guilt destroy you. Don't spend eternity in the void, punishing yourself for not being able to save me. Just remember that I chose this, that we chose this together." The silence that followed carried more weight than words could. Finally, Kale sent back, "I promise. But Maya, you need to promise me something too." "What?" "That you'll come back. That you'll fight with everything you have, and you'll come back to me, because I've spent enough time existing between worlds. I want to know that somewhere, in the physical realm, you're alive and whole and becoming everything you were meant to be." Maya felt tears streaming down her face. "I promise to try." "Good enough," Kale replied, and she felt his ethereal presence in the void wrapping around hers like an embrace across dimensions. Below, Alpha Silvermoon was gathering the 19 souls for one final meeting before they attempted the crossing. Maya descended from the tower to join them, her divided consciousness allowing her to be both present in the courtyard and aware of Kale preparing the pathway through the void. "Before we do this," Alpha Silvermoon said, when everyone had assembled, "I want each of you to understand what we're walking into. The void isn't bound by the laws of physical reality. Time moves differently there. Space is negotiable, and the corruptor, it exists in a state where thought and reality are the same thing, meaning our fears can literally manifest and attack us." Elder Marcus added grimly. "Our doubts can become weapons. Our weaknesses can be exploited in ways that would be impossible in the physical world." "So how do we fight something like that?" Dane asked. "With the same thing we've been practicing," Maya said, "bounded connection. In the void, the strength of our bonds will be our greatest weapon, but only if we can maintain them without letting the corruptor corrupt them into chains." She looked around at each face, seeing the fear and determination mixed in equal measure. "When we cross over," Maya continued, "you're going to see things, memories, possibilities, alternate versions of your worst moments. The void will use everything against you. But remember, none of it is real, unless you give it power by believing it. And the 30 corruption entities? Sira asked. What's the plan for actually fighting them? Maya took a breath. We're going to do what the corruptor doesn't expect. We're not going to fight them individually. We're going to use our 20-soul web as a unified weapon. Transform our bonds into a purging flame that burns away corruption while leaving healthy connection intact. That's never been done before, Elder Marcus said. The first one sealed the devourer, but they never weaponized their bonds. Then we'll be the first, Maya replied. The corruptor has been studying us, learning our tactics. It expects us to defend, so we're going to attack in a way it can't predict. Through the bond, she felt Kale's attention sharpening. You're planning to use the silver flame, aren't you? Not just for healing, but as a weapon. Not a weapon, Maya corrected. A scalpel, to cut away corruption while preserving the healthy tissue underneath. That's going to require more power than you've ever channeled before, Kale warned. Maya, if you burn too bright, then you'll be there to pull me back, she finished. That's what boundaries are for, remember? To keep us from consuming ourselves in the process of fighting consumption. She felt his reluctant agreement and turned her attention back to the gathered souls. Everyone ready? Maya asked. The responses varied. Some nodded firmly. Others looked like they wanted to run, but were standing their ground anyway. But no one backed out. These 19 wolves had already proven they were capable of choosing vulnerability over safety. Now they were about to prove they could choose offense over defense. Maya moved to the center of the courtyard where the ancient altar still stood, the same altar where they'd first bonded to seal the devourer. She placed her hands on the stone and felt silver flame responding to her call, building in intensity until it formed a pillar of light that reached into the sky. Kale, she sent, open the pathway. Through her divided consciousness, Maya felt him reaching across dimensions, felt him using his position within the void to create a bridge between physical reality and the space between worlds. The pillar of silver flame began to pulse, becoming a doorway, a threshold that would allow all 20 souls to cross over while maintaining their connection to their physical bodies. Form the circle, Maya commanded. The 19 souls moved into position around the altar, their hands joining to complete the web of connection. As they linked together, Maya felt their individual consciousnesses beginning to harmonize, preparing for the merger that would allow them to function as one weapon against the corruption. Remember, Maya said as the gateway stabilized, in the void, thought becomes reality, so think clearly, feel deeply, and whatever happens, hold on to who you are. Don't let the corruptor convince you that you're something less, or something more than yourself. The silver flame intensified, and reality began to thin around them. Last chance to back out, Alpha Silvermoon said, his voice steady despite the fear Maya could feel through the bond. No one moved. Then let's go teach the corruptor what happens when connection fights back, Maya said. As one unified consciousness, the 20 souls stepped through the gateway and into the void. The transition was like dying and being reborn in the same instant. Physical sensation fell away, replaced by something that was both more and less than embodiment. They existed as points of conscious light, in an infinite darkness, connected by threads of silver that pulsed with their shared heartbeat. And all around them, the void writhed with hostile presence. The 30 corruption entities Maya had seen earlier were waiting, but they weren't alone. Behind them, vast and terrible, the corruptor itself loomed. A consciousness so large it made galaxies seem small, so invasive it felt like it was already inside their thoughts, before they'd even registered its presence. Welcome. The corruptor's voice resonated through the void, layered with harmonics that made consciousness itself vibrate. I was hoping you'd accept my invitation. So much easier to corrupt you all at once, than to pick you off individually over months. Through the web, Maya felt several souls wanting to panic, to flee back through the gateway. She sent waves of steadying silver flame through the connection, reminding them of everything they'd practiced. Stay together, she commanded through the bond. Remember your boundaries. Remember who you are." Such brave words, the corruptor mocked. Let's see how long that courage lasts. The 30 smaller entities surged forward as one, each targeting a different soul in the web. But instead of defending individually, Maya did what she'd planned from the beginning. She merged the 20 consciousnesses into a single unified awareness. Not the kind of consumption the corruptor practiced, where individual identity drowned in a collective, but something more refined, a harmony where each soul maintained its distinct note, while contributing to a greater chord. 20 individuals becoming one symphony without losing their individual melodies. The corruption entities hit the unified web and recoiled, unable to find individual threads to unravel when everything was simultaneously separate and together. Impossible. The corruptor's voice carried shock for the first time. That level of integration without consumption, it can't be done. "Watch us," Maya sent back, and through the 20-soul web, she channeled more silver flame than she'd ever attempted before. But this time, it wasn't just her power, it was 20 souls worth of silver flame, all unified in purpose, while maintaining individual sovereignty. The result was something that had never existed before, a healing fire that could burn away corruption without destroying the bonds it infected. The wave of purging flame swept outward from their unified consciousness, and the 30 corruption entities screamed as it touched them. Where it passed, their twisted presence dissolved like shadows before dawn, unable to maintain cohesion when faced with connection that honored rather than consumed. "You think you've won?" the corruptor roared, its vast presence pressing down on them from all sides. "I am corruption itself. I am every relationship that becomes possession, every love that becomes obsession, every bond that becomes a prison. You cannot destroy me because I am the natural conclusion of connection taken too far." "No," Maya sent back, the unified voice of 20 souls speaking as one. "You're the perversion of connection, the corruption that happens when boundaries fail, but we're going to show you something you've never seen before. Connection that maintains both intimacy and autonomy. Love that honors rather than consumes." She gathered the full power of the 20-soul web and prepared to strike at the corruptor's core. But before she could release the attack, something shifted in the void. The devourer, still caged behind the seal they'd built, suddenly stirred with interest. And Maya realized with horror that the two entities, corruptor and devourer, possession and emptiness, were communicating. Chapter 4. The Truth Revealed. The moment the devourer and corruptor made contact, Maya understood with sickening clarity that they'd been played from the very beginning. Through the unified consciousness of the 20-soul web, she could sense the communication passing between the two entities. Not words exactly, but exchanges of purpose, of strategy, of ancient understanding between forces that had existed since before creation took its first breath. "They're not enemies," Maya sent through the bond, horror threading through her mental voice. "They were never enemies. They're partners." "Impossible," Alpha Silver Moon's consciousness responded. "The devourer represents emptiness, the end of all things. The corruptor represents twisted connection. They're opposites." "Exactly," Elder Marcus interrupted, his ancient mind piecing together the truth faster than the others. "They're two sides of the same blade, two approaches to the same goal, the destruction of authentic connection." The corruptor's laughter echoed through the void, pleased that they'd finally understood. "So clever, little flames," it purred. "Yes, my sibling and I have been working together since the dawn of consciousness. The devourer attacks connection by promoting isolation, convincing beings that they're better off alone, that vulnerability leads to pain, that walls are safety. And I attack from the other direction, corrupting connection until it becomes so toxic that isolation seems like the only escape." Through the seal they'd built to contain the devourer, Maya felt the void entity's presence pressing outward, adding its voice to the revelation. "Between us," the devourer's voice resonated like the end of stars, "we have destroyed countless realities. Some civilizations we drove into complete isolation, until they withered from loneline. Others we corrupted until their bonds became prisons, and they tore themselves apart trying to escape. And this reality was always going to fall to one of us, the corruptor continued. The only question was which. When you sealed my sibling, you thought you'd won, but you'd actually just ensured your own destruction. Maya felt the pieces clicking into place with terrible logic, because sealing the devourer meant you had to embrace deep connection, had to bond 20 souls together in unprecedented intimacy, and that intimacy is exactly what I feed on, the corruptor finished. The deeper your connections, the more power I have to corrupt them. You built the perfect breeding ground for my influence when you created that 20-soul web. Through the bond, Maya felt despair rippling outward from several souls. Dane's consciousness flickered with the horrifying realization that they'd doomed themselves by succeeding. Sarah's awareness trembled with the understanding that everything they'd built, the school, the teachings, the hope, was just making them more vulnerable to corruption. We can't win, Tomas sent, his mental voice breaking. If we stay isolated, the devourer consumes us. If we connect, the corruptor destroys us. There's no third option. There's always a third option. Kale's voice cut through the despair, his presence in the void blazing with sudden clarity, and these arrogant entities just told us exactly what it is. Maya felt his consciousness merging more closely with hers, sharing an insight that made her breath catch. They're opposites. Kale sent to the entire web. Perfect opposites. The devourer is entropy. The corruptor is excessive order. One is isolation. One is suffocation. One is emptiness. One is consumption. They attack from opposite directions, which means the solution exists in the balance between them. Maya finished, the truth exploding through her awareness like silver flame. Not isolation or consumption, but connection with boundaries. Not walls or chains, but permeable membranes that allow intimacy while preserving autonomy. You think you've discovered something new? The corruptor mocked. That's just another form of connection I can corrupt. Give it time, little flame. Eventually, your boundaries will either harden into walls or dissolve into consumption. There is no stable middle ground. That's where you're wrong, Maya sent back, her consciousness burning with silver fire. Because you're both static forces. The devourer is always empty. You're always corrupt. But connection between conscious beings? That's dynamic. It can shift, adjust, grow. It can maintain balance because it's constantly choosing balance, moment by moment. She pulled the 20-soul web tighter, not into consumption, but into that refined harmony where each soul remained distinct, while contributing to a greater whole. Watch, Maya commanded, and through their unified consciousness, she demonstrated something neither entity had ever witnessed before. She showed them connection that was constantly negotiating boundaries, intimacy that asked permission, unity that honored difference, bonds that were strong specifically because they were flexible rather than rigid. The 20 souls in the web experienced it simultaneously, the feeling of being deeply known without being consumed, of being intimately connected without losing themselves. It was like breathing, like a heartbeat, like any natural process that required both contraction and expansion, both opening and closing, both yes and no existing in dynamic balance. This is what authentic connection looks like. Maya sent to both entities, not the absence of self you represent. She addressed the devourer, and not the obliteration of self you represent. She turned to the corruptor, but self in relationship, distinct individuals choosing again and again to bridge the space between them while maintaining the space that makes them individuals in the first place. Impossible to sustain, the devourer insisted. That balance requires constant conscious effort. Eventually you'll grow tired and fall to one extreme or the other. Then we'll keep choosing. Alpha Silvermoon's voice rang through the bond, steady with the weight of leadership that had spanned decades. Every moment, every day we'll keep choosing balance over extremes. Even when it's exhausting, Sarah added, her consciousness no longer drowning in others' emotions, but dancing between her own feelings and theirs in perfect counterpoint. Even when isolation seems easier, Elder Marcus sent, his ancient wisdom finally integrated with the vulnerability he'd spent centuries avoiding. Even when consumption seems safer, Dane contributed, his voice carrying the memory of his breakdown and his recovery from it. One by one, each of the 20 souls added their commitment, their conscious choice to maintain dynamic balance in the face of forces that wanted to push them to one extreme or another. And their unified conviction created something neither the devourer nor the corruptor had anticipated. The 20-soul web began to transform. The silver threads connecting them grew brighter, stronger, but also more flexible. Where before the bonds had been static connections, now they became living relationships, constantly adjusting, constantly negotiating, constantly choosing connection over isolation and autonomy over consumption. "What are you doing?" the corruptor demanded, its confidence faltering for the first time. "Stop this," the devourer commanded, its vast presence pressing against the seal with new urgency. "We're showing you what conscious relationship looks like," Maya replied, "and we're using it to do what you never thought possible. We're going to cage both of you at once." Through the unified web, Maya channeled not just her silver flame, but the collective power of 20 souls who'd learned to exist in dynamic balance. The purging fire that resulted was unlike anything that had ever existed. It carried both the heat of connection and the coolness of boundaries, both the intimacy of unity and the clarity of individuality. The corruptor shrieked as the flame touched it, unable to corrupt connection that was constantly choosing itself consciously. Its corruption required static bonds it could twist, but these living relationships shifted too quickly, adjusted too readily, maintained boundaries too flexibly. And through the seal containing the devourer, Maya felt the void entity recoiling from the same force. Because consciousness that could hold both connection and autonomy in balance was immune to the seduction of total isolation. "You can't destroy us," the corruptor hissed. "We are fundamental forces. We existed before your species learned to bond. We'll exist after you've forgotten how." "We're not trying to destroy you," Maya said, and she felt the other 19 souls understanding her plan simultaneously. "We're going to do something much worse." She gathered the full power of the 20-soul web, that perfect balance of intimacy and autonomy, connection and boundaries, unity and individuality, and shaped it into a new kind of prison. Not a cage built of static walls like they'd used to contain the devourer, and not a web of rigid connections that the corruptor could corrupt, but something alive, dynamic, constantly adjusting, a prison built from conscious relationship itself. "We're going to cage you both," Maya announced, "not with walls or chains, but with the very thing you can't understand or corrupt, authentic connection that chooses balance moment by moment." The silver flame exploded outward from the 20-soul web, and Maya felt it beginning to form a new structure around both entities, a prison that was simultaneously intimate and boundaried, unified and individual, connected and autonomous. But at the last moment, just as the new cage was about to complete, Maya felt something tear in the web. One of the 20 souls was breaking. Through the bond, she felt Thomas's consciousness fragmenting under the strain of channeling so much power while maintaining such precise balance. He was burning out, consuming himself in the effort to hold the line between extremes. "Thomas, pull back," Maya sent urgently. "Can't," his mental voice was already fading. "Have to hold, have to maintain the balance. If he breaks," Kale warned from his position anchoring the seal, "the entire web could collapse. 20 souls unified means 20 souls vulnerable to the same catastrophic failure." Maya faced another impossible choice in a life that seemed built from them. Let Thomas burn himself out and risk the entire web collapsing, or redirect the power and lose the chance to cage both entities at once. But then, through the web, she felt something else. 18 other souls all making the same choice simultaneously. They reached for Thomas not to save him from the strain, but to share it, to distribute the burden across all 20 consciousnesses, so no single soul bore more weight than it could carry. "That's what balance means," Alpha Silvermoon sent as his consciousness merged more intimately with Thomas's, supporting the younger wolf's failing strength, not standing alone, not drowning together, but holding each other up. The prison of dynamic balance completed with a sound like reality taking a breath. Chapter 5. The Cost of Balance. The new prison settled into place around both the devourer and the corruptor, and for one perfect moment, Maya felt what victory tasted like. Then the cost came due. Maintaining the original seal, containing the devourer, had required one anchor, Cale's consciousness, existing in the void permanently. But this new prison, this cage built from dynamic balance, rather than static walls, required something infinitely more demanding. It required all 20 souls to maintain conscious awareness of the balance, forever. No, Maya breathed as the truth crystallized through the web. No, that's not possible. We can't all exist divided between worlds permanently. But we must. Elder Marcus's ancient consciousness carried the weight of terrible understanding. A prison built from conscious relationship requires consciousness to maintain it. Static walls could stand on their own, but this needs us to keep choosing balance, moment by moment, for as long as we want it to hold. Through the bond, Maya felt the other souls processing the same horrifying realization. They'd succeeded in caging both entities, but the price was their own freedom. All 20 of them would have to split their existence like Maya had, part in the physical world, part in the void, constantly maintaining the delicate balance that kept the prison intact. How long? Syrah's voice carried the question they were all thinking. Forever, Cale replied from his position woven into the seal. Or until another solution is found. This isn't temporary, Maya. You've built something that requires eternal vigilance. Maya felt despair threatening to overwhelm her. She'd thought splitting her own consciousness was sacrifice enough, existing never fully present, always divided between worlds. But now she'd condemned 19 others to the same fate. I'm sorry, she sent through the web, her mental voice breaking. I didn't know. I didn't realize the cost would be. We knew, Alpha Silvermoon interrupted gently. Maybe not consciously, but some part of all of us understood what we were choosing when we agreed to come here. He's right, Dane added. A prison built from conscious relationship obviously requires conscious beings to maintain it. We just didn't want to face that truth until we had to. Through the bond connecting all 20 souls, Maya felt them making peace with their new reality. Some were grieving the lives they'd planned, the futures they'd imagined. Others were already adjusting, finding acceptance in the knowledge that their sacrifice was saving countless lives. But one consciousness in the web was fragmenting worse than before. Thomas, who'd nearly burned out creating the prison, was still breaking. Even with the other 19 sharing the burden, even with the cage complete, something fundamental in him had been damaged by the strain. I can't, his mental voice whispered, barely coherent. Can't hold the balance. Can't maintain boundaries and connection simultaneously. Everything's blurring together. I can't tell where I end and everyone else begins. Maya reached for him through the web, trying to stabilize his fragmenting consciousness with silver flame. But she could feel the truth. Thomas had given too much, pushed too hard. The part of him that could distinguish self from other had been permanently damaged. Thomas, hold on, she sent desperately. We can heal this. No, Cale's voice cut through her denial with terrible gentleness. Maya, you can't heal damage to consciousness itself with silver flame. That's not a wound of the body, or even the mind. That's a wound of being. Then, what do we do? Maya demanded. Just let him dissolve into the collective? Let him lose himself completely? We give him a choice, Alpha Silvermoon said quietly. The same choice we all deserve. Through the bond, the Alpha addressed Tomas directly. You can keep fighting to maintain your individuality, knowing it might be a battle you eventually lose. Or you can accept integration into the collective, not as consumption, but as transformation, becoming part of something larger, while letting go of the separate self that's causing you so much pain. That's death, Syrah protested. You're asking him to choose death. No, Elder Marcus corrected. Death is ending. This is transformation. His consciousness wouldn't cease to exist. It would become part of the web, part of all of us. He'd be everywhere we are, experience everything we experience, just not as a distinct individual anymore. Maya felt Thomas's awareness focusing on the choice before him, felt him considering two equally impossible options: cling to individuality and risk eventual madness, as the boundaries between self and other continued to dissolve, or surrender voluntarily, merge completely with the collective, and exist as part of the whole, rather than as a separate piece. "What would you choose?" Thomas asked Maya directly. "If you were me, what would you choose?" Maya thought about the past 6 months of her own divided existence, thought about the constant effort required to maintain boundaries while staying connected, thought about never being fully present, never completely whole, always existing in the space between states. "I don't know," she admitted. "Both options terrify me. But Thomas, whatever you choose, know that we'll honor it. If you choose to keep fighting for individuality, we'll support you every moment. And if you choose integration, we'll carry you with us forever." The silence that followed felt like the void itself holding its breath. Then Thomas made his choice. "I want to let go," he sent, his mental voice carrying peace that surprised them all. "I've spent my entire life afraid of losing myself, building walls to protect my identity. But maybe that fear was always the Devourer's influence. Maybe true courage isn't clinging to self at all costs, but knowing when to release it." "Are you sure?" Maya asked, tears streaming down both her physical face in the sanctuary and her ethereal form in the void. "I'm sure," Thomas replied. "I don't want to spend eternity fighting a losing battle against entropy. I'd rather transform into something new while I can still choose it consciously." Through the web, Maya felt the other 18 souls preparing to receive him, not to consume or erase him, but to integrate his consciousness into their collective awareness in a way that honored what he'd been, while allowing him to become something new. "Thank you," Thomas sent as his individual boundaries began to dissolve, "for teaching me that connection isn't chains, for showing me that vulnerability isn't weakness, for proving that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is let yourself become part of something larger." His distinct consciousness faded like dawn-consuming starlight, and suddenly he was everywhere in the web. Maya could feel Thomas in Alpha Silvermoon's leadership, in Sarah's empathy, in Dane's recovered strength. He wasn't gone. He was dispersed, integrated, transformed into an essence that lived in all 19 remaining distinct souls. The web adjusted to accommodate his transformation, and Maya felt the prison around the Devourer and Corruptor stabilize even more firmly. Because Thomas's choice had demonstrated something crucial, that the balance they were maintaining wasn't about rigidly clinging to either extreme, but about having the flexibility to shift as needed. 19 now, Kale observed from his position anchoring the seal. Can the prison hold with 19 instead of 20? Maya tested the structure and felt relief wash through her. Yes, because Thomas didn't disappear. He became part of all of us. The power is still here, just distributed differently. Through the void, she felt the Devourer and Corruptor, testing their new prison, probing for weaknesses. But where the old seal had been vulnerable to the Devourer's patient erosion, and where normal bonds would have been vulnerable to the Corruptor's twisting, this living prison adapted to every attack. Because it wasn't static, it was conscious. It learned. "You've won this round," the Corruptor acknowledged, its voice carrying something that might have been respect, "but you've also condemned yourselves. 19 souls existing forever divided between worlds, constantly maintaining balance. How long before you all break like that one did? How long before the strain destroys you one by one?" "As long as it takes," Maya sent back, "because that's what love is, not a feeling or a state, but a choice you keep making, even when it's impossibly hard." She began preparing the 19 souls for the return journey to the physical world. They'd accomplished what they came for. Both entities were caged, reality was secure, but the victory felt hollow, knowing that they were all now bound to the same divided existence she'd chosen months ago. "I'm sorry," Maya sent through the web one more time. "I'm so sorry, this is the cost." "Stop apologizing." Alpha Silvermoon's consciousness carried the firm warmth of a father who'd learned too late how to be gentle. You didn't trap us. You gave us the chance to matter, to be part of something that saves worlds. If the price is never being fully anywhere, well, maybe that's not a curse. Maybe that's just what it means to stand between opposing forces and maintain the balance. The Guardian's burden, Elder Marcus added. The first ones understood this. That's why their seal required 20 souls, not as a sacrifice of death, but as a commitment to eternal vigilance. And we're not alone in it, Sarah said, her consciousness touching each of the others with gentle affirmation. We have each other. Always. Through the bond, Maya felt the 19 souls, 18 distinct individuals, plus the essence of Thomas woven through them all, choosing to accept their new reality. Not with resignation, but with the kind of peace that comes from knowing you're exactly where you need to be, even if it's not where you'd have chosen. All right, Maya said. Let's go home. We have students to teach, lives to live, and an eternity of balance to maintain. Together, Kale added from the void. Together they all echoed. But as the 19 souls prepared to cross back into the physical world, Maya felt something shift in the prison they'd just created. The Devourer and Corruptor weren't trying to break free. They were adapting to their cage, learning its rhythms, studying the consciousness that maintained it, and Maya realized with cold certainty that their victory wasn't an ending. It was the beginning of a much longer war. Chapter 6. Return and Revelation. When the 19 souls crossed back through the gateway into the physical world, Maya expected to find the sanctuary exactly as they'd left it, her students waiting anxiously, the courtyard peaceful under starlight, time having passed in normal increments. Instead, she opened her physical eyes to chaos. 3 days had passed in the physical world while they'd been in the void for what felt like hours, and in those 3 days, something had gone catastrophically wrong. The sanctuary's walls were scorched black in places, as if massive amounts of power had been unleashed without control. Half the gardens were destroyed, and her students, the 23 wolves she'd been teaching, were scattered across the courtyard in various states of distress. Some were unconscious, others were locked in aggressive confrontations, snarling at each other with bared teeth. A few sat alone, visibly shaking, their eyes glazed with the look of wolves who'd seen something that broke them. What happened? Maya demanded, rushing to the nearest student, young Rhea, who'd been so eager to learn just days ago. Rhea looked up at her, with eyes that held too much knowledge and too much pain. You all disappeared through the gateway, she whispered. Just vanished into silver light. We waited for hours, but you didn't come back. And then the bonds started screaming. What bonds? Sarah asked, having materialized beside Maya. The students aren't connected to the 20-soul web. No, Rhea agreed. But we're connected to each other. You taught us that. You taught us to open ourselves, to form bonds, to embrace vulnerability and connection. Her voice broke. You didn't teach us what to do when those bonds started corrupting. Maya felt ice flood her veins. The Corruptor attacked you. While we were in the void, it sent its influence through the gateway and targeted the students. Through her divided consciousness, she felt Kale's alarm from his position maintaining the seal. Maya, that shouldn't be possible. The entities are caged. They shouldn't be able to reach into the physical world anymore. Unless the cage isn't perfect, Elder Marcus sent grimly. Unless maintaining it requires so much of our consciousness that we can't fully monitor everything they're doing. Maya looked around at the devastation and understood the terrible truth. They'd won the battle in the void, had caged both the Devourer and the Corruptor, but the entities were still influencing reality, still finding ways to attack through the cracks in their eternal vigilance. Tell me everything, Maya said to Rhea. Everything that happened while we were gone. The story that emerged was a nightmare of good intentions, twisted into poison. The students had been practicing the exercises Maya taught, opening to each other, forming bonds, learning to be vulnerable. But without the 19 souls present to guide them, without the stability of consciousness that knew how to maintain dynamic balance, their attempts at connection had spiraled into corruption. Some students had merged too completely, losing individual identity in each other's consciousness. Others had panicked and slammed up walls so thick they'd severed their bonds entirely. A few had tried to fight the corruption with aggression, attacking the very wolves they'd been learning to trust. "We didn't know what to do," Ria said, tears streaming down her face. "You taught us that connection was the answer, that vulnerability was strength. But when the bonds started turning poisonous, we didn't know how to save ourselves without destroying everything you'd taught us." Maya felt the weight of her failure settling onto her shoulders. She'd been so focused on the cosmic battle, on caging the entities threatening all of reality, that she hadn't considered what would happen to the students she'd left behind. Hadn't thought about the fact that teaching vulnerable connection without teaching how to protect that vulnerability was setting them up for exactly this kind of catastrophe. "We need to heal them," she sent through the 19 soul web. "All of them. But it's going to take everything we have. We just fought a battle in the void that lasted subjective hours, and cost us one soul." Dane's essence, now woven through the collective, reminded her. "We're exhausted. Maya, we might not have the strength for mass healing right now." "Then we'll find it," Alpha Silvermoon said firmly. "Because if we don't fix this, if we let these students suffer from corruption we inadvertently caused, we're no better than the entities we just caged." Through the bond, Maya felt the 18 distinct souls and the dispersed essence of Thomas all gathering their remaining strength. They were exhausted, stretched thin between worlds, still adjusting to their permanently divided existence. But they were also guardians now, and guardians didn't get to rest when people needed them. Maya moved to the center of the courtyard and placed her hands on the scorched earth. "Everyone who can still move," she called out to the students. "Come to me, form a circle around the altar." Slowly, painfully, the students who weren't unconscious dragged themselves into position. Some had to be carried by others. A few crawled, but within minutes, all 23 were arranged in a rough approximation of the formation the 20 souls had used to seal the Devourer months ago. "What you experienced while we were gone," Maya said, her voice carrying to every corner of the courtyard, "was corruption, the twisting of healthy bonds into poisonous ones. And I'm sorry, I'm so sorry, that I didn't prepare you better for that possibility." "How could you have known?" one of the older students asked. "You were fighting cosmic entities. How were you supposed to predict they'd attack us?" "Because I should have understood that the moment you open yourself to connection, you become vulnerable to corruption," Maya replied. "That's not a flaw in connection itself. It's just reality. Anything powerful enough to heal can be twisted into something that harms. I taught you the power without teaching you the protection." She looked around at their wounded faces, physical, emotional, and spiritual injuries, all tangled together. "So now I'm going to teach you what I just learned in the void," Maya continued. "I'm going to teach you that healthy connection requires 3 things: vulnerability, boundaries, and constant conscious choice. Not once, not as a state you achieve and then maintain passively, but as something you choose every single moment." Through the 19 soul web, Maya began channeling Silver Flame, not to heal their wounds directly, but to show them how to heal themselves. She let them feel through her consciousness what dynamic balance actually meant in practice. They felt her connection to Kale, intimate and deep, but with clear boundaries that allowed both of them to exist as distinct individuals. They felt the web connecting all 19 souls, unified but not merged, collective but not consumptive. They felt the constant, moment-by-moment choices required to maintain that balance. "This is what you're aiming for," Maya said. "Not perfect unity, not complete isolation, but the space between, where you can be known without being consumed, where you can be vulnerable without being destroyed, where you can be part of something larger while remaining irreducibly yourself." Slowly, guided by Maya's silver flame and the collective wisdom of 19 souls who'd learned these lessons in the hardest way possible, the students began to heal. Those who'd merged too completely learned to gently separate, re-establishing individual identity while maintaining connection. Those who'd slammed up walls learned to build boundaries instead, permeable membranes rather than impenetrable barriers. Those who'd lashed out in fear learned to recognize the difference between protecting yourself and attacking others. It took hours. The sun rose while they worked, painting the sanctuary in shades of gold and amber. By the time the last student had stabilized, by the time all 23 had found their balance between connection and autonomy, Maya and the 18 other souls were barely conscious. But they'd done it. They'd fixed what had been broken, taught what should have been taught from the beginning. "Thank you," Rhea said, when it was over, her voice steady in a way it hadn't been before, "for coming back, for not abandoning us when we needed you." "We'll never abandon you," Maya replied. "That's what guardianship means. We maintain the balance in the void, but we also maintain the balance here, teaching, guiding, helping everyone who's willing to learn the difference between healthy connection and corruption." Through the bond, she felt Kale's presence focusing on her. "Maya, you need to rest. You're burning yourself out trying to be everywhere at once." "I can't rest," she sent back. "Not when there's so much to do, so much to teach." "That's not sustainable," Alpha Silver Moon interrupted gently, "and it's exactly the kind of thinking that will lead you to the same fate as Toma's. You need to practice what you preach. Boundaries, Maya, including boundaries around how much you can give without depleting yourself." The words hit her like physical blows because she knew he was right. She'd been so focused on teaching others about balance that she'd forgotten to maintain her own, had been pushing herself beyond sustainable limits, because the need felt so urgent, the stakes so high. "The sanctuary needs more teachers," Elder Marcus said aloud, addressing both Maya and the recovered students. "Not just Maya splitting herself between worlds while trying to guide everyone. We need others who understand these principles, who can carry on the work even when the 19 of us are focused on maintaining the prison." Maya looked at her students, wounded but healing, broken but rebuilding, and saw potential she hadn't noticed before. "You're right," she said. "I've been trying to be everything to everyone, which is another form of imbalance." She addressed the 23 students directly. "Some of you came here to learn healing. Others came to find belonging. But what if you stayed to become teachers yourselves? What if the sanctuary became not just my school, but our school, a place where anyone who's learned these lessons can help others learn them too?" She saw hope kindling in exhausted eyes, saw wolves who'd been broken by corruption beginning to imagine themselves as healers of that same corruption in others. "Yes," Rhea said immediately. "Yes, I want to teach. I want to make sure no one else has to learn these lessons the way we did, through pain and near destruction." Others nodded, adding their agreement. Not all 23, some would return to their original packs, carrying the lessons but not the teaching. But enough. Enough to spread the work beyond what Maya could do alone. Through the bond, Maya felt the other 18 souls supporting her decision, felt their relief that she was finally learning to distribute the burden, to build something sustainable rather than heroic. "This is good," Kale sent. "This is how change actually happens, not through one powerful individual, but through networks of people all choosing balance in their own spheres." Maya smiled despite her exhaustion. "All right then, let's rebuild what was broken, and make it stronger." But even as she said the words, through her divided consciousness, Maya felt something shift in the void. The devourer and corruptor were learning from what had just happened, were understanding that they didn't need to break free of their prison to cause damage. They could attack through the cracks, through the moments when the 19 souls' attention was divided. The war wasn't over. It was just evolving. Chapter 7, 1 year later. 1 year after the caging of the devourer and corruptor, the sanctuary of the Silver Flame had transformed into something Maya had never imagined. What had started as one school in a repurposed fortress had grown into a network spanning 7 territories. Over 200 wolves had passed through the original sanctuary's gates, learning the delicate art of maintaining balance between connection and autonomy. 37 of them had stayed to become teachers themselves, establishing satellite schools in their home territories. Maya stood in the Great Hall, now expanded and renovated with help from a dozen different packs, and watched her newest students practice the boundary exercises that had once nearly destroyed her first class. These wolves moved with confidence her early students hadn't possessed, guided by teachers who'd learned these lessons through experience rather than theory. Rhea had become one of the best instructors, her natural empathy combined with hard-won wisdom, making her invaluable for students struggling with overconnection. Another early student, a wolf named Marcus, named after Maya's lost love, though she'd never told him that, specialized in teaching wolves how to rebuild after severe corruption damage. Through her divided consciousness, Maya felt the constant pull of the void, where she and the other 18 souls maintained the prison. It had become almost second nature now, this existence split between worlds. Part of her taught students in the physical realm, while another part monitored the cage, watching for signs that the devourer or corruptor might be adapting, evolving, finding new ways to attack. How were the seals today? Maya sent to Kale, their daily check-in ritual, as familiar as breathing. Stable, he replied from his position woven into the prison's structure. But Maya, they're getting quieter, both entities. It's been weeks since they've attempted any kind of probe or attack. Maya felt unease prickling along her spine. That's not good news, is it? No, Kale agreed. Silence from cosmic entities usually means they're planning something. But I can't see what. The prison is holding. They're contained. And yet it feels like the calm before a storm, Maya finished. Through the 19-soul web, which now included Thomas's essence dispersed among them all, Maya felt the others registering the same concern. Alpha Silvermoon from his territory, Sarah from the archives, where she'd been researching ancient texts, Elder Marcus, from the council meetings, where he'd been spreading their teachings to skeptical traditionalists. They'd all noticed the unsettling quiet from the caged entities. Maybe they've given up, Dane's essence suggested through the collective. Maybe they realize the prison is too strong to break. Or maybe they've found a different approach, Elder Marcus countered. One we're not monitoring, because we're focused on the cage itself. Maya's unease deepened into dread. Elder Marcus was right. They'd been so focused on maintaining the prison, on teaching wolves to resist corruption, that they hadn't considered what else the entities might be doing during their silence. I need to investigate, Maya sent through the web. Shift more of my consciousness into the void, and actually look at what they're doing instead of just monitoring the cage's integrity. Be careful, Kale warned. If they're quiet because they're setting a trap, then I need to spring it before it catches all of us. Maya interrupted. She excused herself from the training session, leaving Rhea to guide the students through the rest of their exercises. Finding a quiet corner of the sanctuary, Maya sat and began the meditation that would allow her to shift more of her awareness into the void. The transition had become smoother over the past year, her consciousness flowing between worlds like water between connected pools. Within moments, her ethereal form materialized in the void beside Kale's presence, both of them existing as beings of light and thought rather than flesh and bone. Show me what you've been seeing, Maya sent. Kale guided her awareness to the prison they'd built, that living structure of dynamic balance that caged both the devourer's emptiness and the corruptor's consumption. From the outside, it looked perfect, the bonds holding it together, pulsed with healthy rhythm, neither too rigid nor too fluid. The balance between connection and autonomy, between intimacy and boundaries, seemed flawless. But when Maya looked closer, when she pushed her perception deeper into the structure itself, she saw what had been worrying Kale. The entities weren't attacking the prison. They were studying it. More than that, they were learning from it. Oh no, Maya breathed. No. You see it too, Kale said grimly. Maya saw it. The devourer and corruptor, caged together for the first time in their eternal existence, had been forced into proximity with each other. And rather than fighting or trying to escape, they'd been doing something neither of them had ever done before. They were cooperating. Actually cooperating. Not just working toward the same goal from different directions. The devourer, entity of emptiness and isolation, was learning from the corruptor's understanding of twisted connection, and the corruptor, master of corrupted bonds, was learning from the devourer's knowledge of how to exploit loneliness and fear. They're integrating, Maya realized with horror, becoming something new, something that combines both isolation and corruption into a single force. And they're using our prison as a school, Kale added. The dynamic balance we built to contain them? They're studying how it works, learning the principles behind it. Maya, they're using the thing we made to cage them as a template for their own evolution. Through the bond, Maya felt the other 17 souls tuning into the conversation, felt their alarms spreading like wildfire through the web. How long until they complete the integration? Alpha Silvermoon demanded. Maya examined the entities more closely, trying to gauge their progress. What she found made her blood freeze. Days, she sent back. Maybe a week. They're almost finished. And when the integration completes, when they become a single entity that understands both isolation and corruption, both emptiness and consumption, the prison won't hold them, Elder Marcus finished, because it was designed to cage two separate forces, not one unified entity that embodies both extremes. We need to stop them, Sarah sent urgently. Disrupt the integration before it completes. How? Dane's essence asked. We can't enter the prison without risk of corruption or consumption, and attacking from outside might just accelerate their merger. Maya stared at the evolving entities, watching as the Devourer's emptiness began to take on aspects of the Corruptor's invasiveness, as the Corruptor's hunger for possession began to incorporate the Devourer's patient erosion. They were becoming something that had never existed before, something that could attack from both directions simultaneously, making you feel isolated and suffocated, empty and consumed, all at once. There's only one way to stop them, Maya said quietly. We have to enter the prison ourselves, face them directly, and disrupt the integration from the inside. That's suicide, Kale protested. Maya, you can't. We can't let them complete this, Maya interrupted. If they become one entity that embodies both extremes, that understands how to attack isolation and connection simultaneously, they won't just escape their cage. They'll be powerful enough to corrupt or consume everything, every bond, every relationship, every attempt at balance across all of reality. Through the web, she felt the 18 souls processing the terrible choice before them. Risk everything by entering the prison to stop the integration, or play it safe, and hope the cage somehow held, when the entities became something new. I'm going in, Maya announced. I built this prison. If it's going to become a school for cosmic entities, then I need to be the one to shut down the lesson. Not alone, Kale sent immediately. I'm anchoring the seal. I can reach into the prison's interior more easily than anyone. And I'm coming, Alpha Silvermoon added. You need someone with experience making impossible choices under pressure. One by one, the 18 souls volunteered. Not all of them. Some needed to stay outside to maintain the prison's structure if things went catastrophically wrong. But 9 souls total decided to risk entering the cage to confront the integrating entities. Maya, Kale, Alpha Silvermoon, Sarah, Elder Marcus, Dane's dispersed essence concentrated through Sarah's consciousness, and 3 others, warriors from Kale's original pack, who'd proven themselves capable of maintaining balance under extreme pressure. The rest of you Maya sent to the 9 remaining outside. If we fail, if we get consumed or corrupted in there, you need to seal us inside. Don't let the entities use us as bridges to escape. We're not sealing you in, one of the warriors outside protested. We'll find another way. Promise me, Maya insisted. The entities are more important than any individual life. Even mine. Especially mine. Promise that if we fail, you'll do what's necessary. The silence that followed was deafening. Finally, the 9 souls outside the prison sent their reluctant agreement. We promise, they said as one, but you'd better not make us keep it. Maya manifested her ethereal form at the entrance to the prison, the place where the dynamic balance was thinnest, where consciousness could pass through, if properly prepared. Behind her, the other 8 souls who'd volunteered gathered, their forms glowing with silver flame and determination. Ready? Maya asked. No, Sarah admitted. But let's do it anyway. Through the web, Maya felt Kale's love and fear washing over her in equal measure, felt Alpha Silvermoon's paternal pride, felt Elder Marcus's ancient blessing, felt the essence of Thomas woven through them all, reminding them that sometimes transformation was the bravest choice. For balance, Maya said. For balance, they echoed. And together, 9 souls entered the prison to face entities that were becoming something reality had never witnessed before. A perfect integration of isolation and corruption, emptiness and consumption, the ultimate enemy of authentic connection. Inside the cage, Maya's ethereal form solidified into awareness, and what she saw made her understand just how much trouble they were really in. The Devourer and Corruptor weren't just integrating, they were almost finished, and the new entity they were becoming had been waiting for someone to enter the prison, had been counting on it. Hello, little flames. The merging entities spoke with one voice that carried both emptiness and invasion. We were hoping you'd come. After all, we need something to test our new form on. And you've brought us 9 perfect subjects. The prison sealed behind them with the sound of fate clicking into place. Chapter 8. The Final Battle. The entity that had once been 2 separate forces now existed as something impossibly unified. The Devourer's patient emptiness merged seamlessly with the Corruptor's invasive consumption. It called itself the Void That Consumes, and it was the most terrifying thing Maya had ever witnessed. Because it understood everything, every weakness in connection, it could corrupt, every strength in isolation, it could exploit. It was absence and presence simultaneously, emptiness and overwhelming fullness, the perfect predator for consciousness itself. Did you really think we were fighting each other all this time? The entity asked, its voice layered with harmonics that made reality itself shudder. We've been partners since before your species learned language. We've destroyed countless realities by playing our little game, pushing civilizations toward isolation or corruption until they tore themselves apart. Through the bond connecting the 9 souls trapped inside the prison, Maya felt mounting horror as the truth crystallized. But this reality was special. The void that consumes continued. This reality produced you, Maya Karen, a silver flame healer who could actually maintain balance between our extremes. We've never encountered that before, so we had to adapt, had to learn, had to become what you were becoming. You used us, Kale sent, his consciousness blazing with fury, used our prison as an incubator for your evolution. Of course, the entity replied with something like affection. You built us the perfect laboratory, forced us into proximity with each other for the first time in our existence, gave us time to study how you maintain dynamic balance. And now we've learned to do the same, to be both isolated and connected, both empty and consuming, both attacking from opposite directions at once. The void that consumes began to move toward the 9 trapped souls, its presence simultaneously distant and oppressively close. And now we're going to test our new form on the 9 of you, it said. 9 souls who understand balance. 9 perfect subjects to see if our integration is complete. If we can corrupt and consume you simultaneously, then nothing in any reality will be able to resist us. Maya felt the entity's attention focusing on her first, and the attack when it came was unlike anything she'd experienced before. The Devourer's influence tried to convince her she was fundamentally alone, that even surrounded by 8 other souls, even connected through the web to 19 others, she was isolated in ways that could never be bridged, that every connection was ultimately an illusion, that separation was the only truth. And at the exact same moment, the Corruptor's influence tried to dissolve her boundaries completely, to make her merge so thoroughly with the others, that she lost all sense of individual identity. That connection was the only truth, that separation was the illusion. Both attacks hit simultaneously, trying to tear her apart from opposite directions, either fly apart into complete isolation, or collapse into total consumption, with no middle ground, no balance, no space to exist, as both connected and autonomous. Maya screamed, her consciousness fragmenting under the impossible pressure, but then she felt them, 8 other souls reaching for her through the web, not to save her, but to share the burden. Alpha Silvermoon taking part of the isolation attack, absorbing the Devourer's whispers about how leadership meant standing alone. Sarah taking part of the consumption attack, her empathy making her natural target for the Corruptor's push toward complete merger. Together, Kale sent, his presence weaving through hers in ways that honored both their connection and their individuality. We face this together. The 9 souls did what they'd spent a year learning to do. They maintained dynamic balance even under impossible pressure. When the Devourer pushed them toward isolation, they leaned into connection. When the Corruptor tried to consume their boundaries, they leaned into autonomy, not as static resistance, but as constant adjustment, like dancers responding to a partner's movements. Impressive, the void that consumes acknowledged, but you can't maintain that forever. Eventually you'll tire, eventually you'll make a mistake, and when you do, we'll be there. It intensified the attacks, hitting all 9 souls simultaneously, with both isolation and consumption. The pressure was immense, like trying to exist in a space that was simultaneously expanding to infinity and collapsing to nothing. Through the web, Maya felt one of Kale's warriors beginning to break, a wolf named Stefan, whose consciousness was fracturing under the strain of being pulled in opposite directions at once. I can't, Stefan sent desperately. Can't hold both. Have to choose, isolation or consumption. Have to pick one. No. Elder Marcus's ancient voice cut through the panic. That's what it wants you to believe. That there are only 2 options, but there's always a third. The space between extremes where consciousness can exist in dynamic tension. I don't understand, Stefan gasped. Then feel it, Maya sent, and through the bond, she showed him what she'd learned through a year of divided existence. She showed Stefan what it meant to be both alone and connected, to have individual sovereignty while being intimately bound to others. She showed him the constant dance of adjustment, the moment-by-moment choices that allowed balance to exist, not as a state, but as a practice. And Stefan, on the edge of complete dissolution, understood. His consciousness stabilized, not by choosing isolation or consumption, but by existing in the space between them, by making that choice, again and again, moment after moment, refusing to let the void that consumes force him toward either extreme. Interesting, the entity said, and Maya heard genuine curiosity in its voice. You're actually teaching each other how to resist us in real time, adapting faster than we can break you. We've never encountered that before. Because you've never encountered consciousness that actually practices what it preaches, Maya shot back. You've only attacked civilizations that understood balance in theory. We understand it in practice. Every single day, every single moment, we choose balance. And that choice is what you can never corrupt or consume. She felt the truth of her words resonating through the 9-soul web, felt all of them understanding simultaneously that the void that consumes, for all its power, for all its evolution, couldn't actually create anything. It could only attack, corrupt, consume. It had no experience with conscious, moment-by-moment choice. Then let's test that theory, the entity said. It stopped attacking the 9 souls individually, and instead turned its full attention to the bonds connecting them. If it couldn't break them as individuals, it would try to shatter the web itself. The attacks came fast and brutal. The Devourer's influence tried to convince each soul that connecting to the others made them weak, that interdependence was a trap. The Corruptor's influence tried to merge them so completely that the individual threads of the web dissolved into undifferentiated collective. But the 9 souls did something the void that consumes hadn't anticipated. They weaponized their bonds. Instead of just defending against attacks, they turned their connections into conduits for Silver Flame. Maya's healing power, amplified by 8 other souls, purified by their collective understanding of balance, became something that had never existed before, a force that could burn away corruption and emptiness simultaneously, while leaving healthy consciousness intact. No, the void that consumes recoiled. That's not possible. We are fundamental forces. We can't be. You can be contained, Maya interrupted, and that's exactly what we're going to do. Through the nine-soul web, she coordinated an attack that used every lesson they'd learned. Alpha Silvermoon's leadership, Sarah's empathy, Elder Marcus's wisdom, Kale's strength, the essence of Thomas woven through them all, and the warrior's determination, all of it focused into one unified strike. The silver flame that erupted from their combined consciousness was like nothing the void had ever encountered. It wasn't just healing energy or destructive force. It was conscious balance made manifest, the ability to hold isolation and connection in perfect dynamic tension. The void that consumes screamed as the flame touched it, and for the first time since the beginning of its existence, it felt something like fear. "You can't destroy us," it insisted, but the confidence was gone from its voice. "We're not trying to destroy you," Maya said. "We're doing something worse. We're teaching you what balance feels like." The silver flame poured into the entity, and instead of destroying it, it began to transform it, showing the devourer what connection felt like without consumption, showing the corruptor what autonomy felt like without isolation. The entity began to fracture, not breaking apart, but separating back into its component forces. The integration was reversing, the void that consumes splitting back into the devourer and corruptor. But this time, both entities were changed. Both had experienced, through the silver flame, what it meant to exist in balance, and that knowledge, that understanding, was burning through their very essence, like acid. "What have you done to us?" the devourer asked, its voice carrying confusion instead of emptiness. "We've shown you the thing you've never experienced," Maya replied. "Genuine connection. Real autonomy. The space between your extremes where consciousness actually thrives." Through the bond, Maya felt Kale reaching for her awareness. "The prison is destabilizing. Maya, when you forced them apart with silver flame, you disrupted the cage's structure. We need to rebuild it now, before they escape." But Maya was already working, the 9 souls moving in perfect synchronization. They used the silver flame not to cage the entities with static walls or rigid bonds, but to create something new. A prison that wasn't about containing them, but about teaching them. They wove a structure around the devourer and corruptor that constantly demonstrated balance, showing them again and again what it meant to exist between extremes, not forcing them to change, but exposing them to the possibility that there was more than just isolation or consumption. "You're trying to rehabilitate cosmic entities of entropy and corruption," Elder Marcus sent with something like awe. "That's either brilliant or insane." "Maybe both," Maya admitted. "But if they can learn balance, if they can transform even slightly, then they become less of a threat. Not harmless, but manageable." The new prison completed around both entities, and Maya felt it stabilize. But this time, it wasn't maintained by 19 souls existing in divided consciousness. It was maintained by the entities themselves, their constant exposure to balance creating a feedback loop that kept them contained. "This won't last forever," the corruptor said, quietly. "Eventually we'll adapt to this, learn how to corrupt even balance itself." "Then we'll adapt too," Maya replied. "That's what consciousness does. It learns, grows, changes. You're not the only ones who can evolve." Through the 9-soul web, Maya began preparing them for extraction from the prison. They'd done what they came for, stopped the integration, rebuilt the cage, bought reality more time. But as they moved toward the exit, the devourer spoke one last time. "You've shown us something we've never experienced," it said, "and we don't know what to do with that knowledge. It burns, it transforms. It won't let us exist the way we always have." "Good," Maya sent back. "Now you know how the rest of consciousness feels when you attack them." The 9 souls emerged from the prison to find the other 10 waiting anxiously outside. Chapter 9. The New World. The 9 souls who'd entered the prison emerged, changed in ways that couldn't be quantified or easily explained. They'd faced the ultimate enemy of connection, an entity that embodied both isolation and corruption simultaneously, and they'd survived. More than survived. They'd transformed it, and in the process, they'd been transformed themselves. Maya stood once more in the sanctuary's great hall, 3 days after emerging from the prison, watching her expanded faculty teach classes that now included wolves from territories that had been hostile to their teachings just months ago. The battle in the void had rippled outward through the 19-soul web, and every wolf connected to their network had felt the moment when balance won against the extremes. Word had spread. The skeptics who'd dismissed their teachings as naive idealism had been forced to reconsider when cosmic entities that had existed since before creation learned something new. If forces that ancient could transform, even slightly, then maybe the cynics were wrong about connection being impossible to maintain. How does it feel? Kale's presence in her consciousness carried warmth and pride. Knowing you changed entities that have destroyed countless realities. Terrifying, Maya admitted. Because I know it's not permanent. The Devourer said it themselves. Eventually they'll adapt, find ways to corrupt even balance. We bought time, not victory. But you bought enough time for something crucial to happen, Kale replied. You proved that transformation is possible, that even the most fundamental forces can learn, can change, can become something other than what they've always been. Through her divided consciousness, which had become so natural over the past year, that she rarely noticed the split anymore, Maya felt the prison they'd rebuilt. The Devourer and Corruptor remained separate now, no longer integrating into the void that consumes, and the cage around them was different than before. Instead of being maintained purely by the 19 souls' vigilance, the prison now had a strange new property. It fed the entities constant examples of balance, showing them through the lived experiences of the 19 consciousness, connected to reality, what it meant to exist between extremes. It was uncomfortable for the entities. Maya could feel that through the seal, like forcing creatures of absolute zero and absolute heat to experience room temperature, not painful exactly, but deeply disorienting. They were learning despite themselves, transforming incrementally whether they wanted to or not. Do you think they'll ever actually become not evil? Sarah asked, through the web, her consciousness touching Maya's with gentle curiosity. Maya considered the question. I don't think evil is the right word for what they are. They're more like natural processes. Entropy and corruption are real forces in the universe. But maybe, just maybe, they can learn to exist in ways that don't require destroying consciousness to fulfill their purpose. That's optimistic, Alpha Silvermoon observed. But after everything we've been through, I suppose optimism is earned rather than naive. Through the hall, Maya watched Ria guiding a pair of students through a particularly difficult boundary exercise. One student was a young wolf from the Eastern Territories, who'd been exiled for forming bonds too intensely, losing herself and others' identities. The other was an older wolf from a pack that valued isolation, who'd spent decades alone and forgotten how to connect at all. Under Ria's gentle instruction, they were learning to find balance together. The overconnected student, practicing boundaries while the isolated student practiced opening. It was slow work, requiring constant adjustment and infinite patience, but it was working. This is what we're really fighting for. Maya sent through the 19-soul web, not the cosmic battles or the entity caging, but this individual wolves learning to exist in that space between isolation and consumption, learning to be both autonomous and connected. It's spreading faster than we anticipated, Elder Marcus added. 7 territories now, 200 graduates, and I'm receiving requests from packs as far as the southern reaches. They want teachers, want to establish their own schools. Can we sustain that kind of expansion? One of the warriors asked. We're already stretched thin maintaining the prison and teaching. Maya felt the familiar tension between staying small and sustainable versus growing to meet the massive need. It was another balance to maintain, expansion versus stability, reaching more wolves versus maintaining quality of teaching. We don't do it alone, she decided. We train teachers who train more teachers. Create a network where everyone who learns can eventually teach. Not a hierarchy with us at the top, but a web where knowledge flows in all directions. Through the bond, she felt the others' agreement. They'd learned the hard way that no single individual or small group could solve problems this vast. But networks of conscious beings, choosing balance in their own spheres, that could actually change reality. There's something else we need to discuss, Kale said, his presence in the void growing serious. The prison is stable now, and the entities are adapting to their new cage, which means the 19 of us don't need to maintain constant vigilance the way we did before. Maya felt hope fluttering in her chest. Are you saying? I'm saying we might be able to exist less divided, Kale continued. Not completely whole. We'll always need to monitor the seal. But maybe instead of splitting our consciousness 50-50 between worlds, we could shift to 70-30, be more present in the physical realm while keeping enough awareness in the void to respond if needed. The implications hit Maya like a physical force. More presence, more ability to be fully in the moment with her students, with the work, with life itself. Not complete restoration of what she'd sacrificed, but significant improvement over her current fractured existence. How? Alpha Silvermoon demanded. The prison requires consciousness to maintain it. But it's self-reinforcing now, Elder Marcus explained, his ancient mind already working through the mechanics. The entity's exposure to balance creates a feedback loop. As long as we check in regularly, as long as we maintain the general structure, it doesn't require constant active maintenance anymore. It's like the difference between holding a door closed with your body versus installing a lock, Sarah added. We built something that does most of the work itself now. Through the web, Maya felt the 19 souls processing this revelation. They'd all made peace with their divided existence, had learned to find meaning in the sacrifice. But the possibility of being more whole, more present, was intoxicating. We should test it, Maya said carefully. One of us shifts their consciousness more toward the physical world, while the others monitor the seal. If it holds stable, we can all gradually make the adjustment. I volunteer, Sarah offered immediately. My work in the archives doesn't require void consciousness, the way Maya's teaching or Kale's anchoring does. Over the next hour, with the other 18 souls watching carefully, Sarah began shifting her awareness. Instead of existing equally between worlds, she gradually pulled more of her consciousness into the physical realm until she was nearly complete there, with only a thin thread connecting her to the void. Through the web, Maya felt Sarah's joy as she experienced full presence for the first time in over a year, felt her moving through the sanctuary's library, without that constant sense of being partially elsewhere, felt her picking up a book, and actually feeling the texture of pages against her fingers with complete attention. The seal is holding, Kale reported from the void. Sarah's shift didn't destabilize anything. If anything, the prison seems stronger because her consciousness is more focused on the physical monitoring side. Then we all make the shift, Alpha Silvermoon said, gradually, carefully, but we reclaim as much of our whole existence as we can. One by one, the 19 souls began adjusting their consciousness distribution, not abandoning their responsibility to maintain the seal, but finding a more sustainable balance between their duty as guardians and their needs as living beings. Maya went last, afraid to hope, afraid that the moment she tried to be more present the seal would crack and everything would fall apart. But when she finally shifted her awareness, pulling more of herself into the physical world while leaving just enough in the void to monitor and respond, nothing catastrophic happened. The seal held, the entities remained contained, learning their uncomfortable lessons about balance. And Maya Karen, for the first time in over a year, felt almost whole. She opened her physical eyes fully, experiencing the sanctuary with a depth of presence she'd nearly forgotten was possible. She could hear every nuance in her students' conversations, could feel the warmth of sunlight through the windows without the constant distraction of void consciousness pulling at her attention. Kale, she sent through their connection. I can almost feel completely real again. Good, he replied, his presence still primarily in the void, but with more attention focused on her than before. You deserve that, Maya. After everything you've sacrificed, you deserve to live as much of your life as possible. Through the hall, Rhea noticed Maya's changed presence and smiled, understanding without explanation that something fundamental had shifted. You look more here, the young teacher said. I am more here, Maya confirmed, We all are. We found a better balance. Isn't that what we've been teaching all along? Elder Marcus sent through the web with dry amusement. That balance isn't a static state, but something you constantly adjust and refine. We've been so focused on teaching it to others that we forgot to keep practicing it ourselves. Maya laughed, fully, deeply, without her consciousness being partly elsewhere. It felt like coming home to herself. But even as joy flooded through her, even as the 19 souls celebrated their newfound ability to be more present in their own lives, Maya felt a familiar tingle of warning through her connection to the void. Something was stirring in the space between worlds. Not the devourer or corrupter. They remained caged and learning, but something else. Something that had been watching the entire battle, learning from it, waiting for its own moment. Maya, Kale's voice carried urgency. Look at the edges of the void. Something's there. Something that was hidden before, but is revealing itself now. Maya shifted more awareness back to the void, and what she saw made her breath catch. Beyond the prison containing the devourer and corrupter, beyond the space where reality touched non-existence, other presences were gathering. Not entities exactly, but possibilities. Potential threats that existed in quantum states, waiting to collapse into reality when conditions were right. There are more, she breathed. The devourer and corrupter aren't unique. They're just the first we encountered. How many more? Alpha Silvermoon asked. Maya tried to count the stirring presences, and gave up. Dozens, maybe hundreds. All of them watching, learning from what we did, preparing their own approaches to attacking consciousness. Through the web, she felt the 19 souls processing this revelation. They'd won the battle. They'd caged the ultimate enemy of connection. They'd built a network spanning territories and taught hundreds of wolves how to maintain balance. And it wasn't nearly enough. This is going to take generations. Sierra sent quietly. Maybe centuries. We've won one battle, but the war for consciousness itself is just beginning. Then we'd better start building something that outlasts us, Maya replied. Chapter 10. Legacy of the Silver Flame. 5 years after caging the devourer and corrupter, Maya Karen stood on the same cliffs where this journey had begun and watched the sun set over a world that had been fundamentally transformed. The sanctuary of the Silver Flame had grown beyond anything she'd imagined. 43 territories now hosted schools teaching the principles of dynamic balance. Over 3,000 wolves had graduated, learning to maintain the space between isolation and consumption. And of those graduates, 500 had stayed to become teachers themselves, carrying the work forward into regions Maya would never personally reach. Through her consciousness, still divided between worlds, but now weighted 70% physical, 30% void, Maya could feel the network they'd built. Thousands of wolves all practicing conscious balance, all choosing connection with boundaries, all refusing to be pushed toward either extreme. It wasn't perfect. Some students still struggled, still fell into corruption or isolation despite the teachings. Some packs still rejected their work, still clung to old ways of either rigid independence or suffocating collectivism. And in the void, those dozens of potential entities still waited, still watched, still prepared their own approaches to attacking consciousness. But for the first time in her life, Maya felt something she'd never expected to feel. Hope that wasn't naive. Penny for your thoughts. Kale's presence touched hers through their connection, warm and familiar. Over the past 5 years, their bond had evolved into something neither of them could have predicted when this all began. Not the manipulative cage Kale had originally tried to build, and not the suffocating merger the corrupter had attempted to force, but something living, dynamic, constantly negotiating the space between intimacy and autonomy. They would never be together in the traditional sense. Kale still existed primarily in the void, anchoring the seal from the inside, but their consciousness touched constantly, sharing thoughts and feelings, and presence in ways that transcended physical limitation. I'm thinking about Marcus, Maya admitted, the boy I loved who died because I didn't know how to control my gift, and how he'd probably be proud of what we've built, even though building it required his death as the catalyst. You've transformed his tragedy into meaning, Kale said gently. That's not erasing what happened, but it's honoring him by making sure others don't have to learn the same lessons through the same pain. Maya nodded, feeling the truth of that settling into her bones. She would always carry the weight of those 16 deaths, would always wonder if there had been another way, a better choice, a path that didn't require such devastating consequences. But she'd learned to carry that weight without letting it crush her, to hold grief and hope simultaneously, to acknowledge pain while still choosing to build something better. The first ones left records. Elder Marcus sent through the 19 Soul Web, interrupting her reflection. I found them buried deep in the archives. They knew this would be generational work, knew that one group of guardians wouldn't be enough. Through the connection, he shared what he'd discovered, ancient texts describing how the original 20 souls who'd sealed the Devourer and Corruptor had spent their entire lives preparing the next generation to take over the work. They built networks, trained teachers, created systems that could outlive them. They knew from the beginning that victory wasn't possible, Elder Marcus continued. Only vigilance. Only the choice to keep choosing balance, generation after generation, forever. That should be depressing, Sarah observed. But somehow it's not. Because it means the work matters, Alpha Silvermoon replied. If it were temporary, if we could cage the entities once and be done, then it would just be a task to complete. But this is a way of being. A practice that has to be maintained by conscious choice, which means every moment matters. Through the web, Maya felt the 19 souls, 18 distinct individuals plus Tomas's essence woven through them all, reaching a collective understanding that felt like coming home. This was their purpose, not to win a final victory against entropy and corruption, but to stand guard at the boundary between extremes and teach others to stand guard with them. To build networks of conscious beings, choosing balance, expanding outward across territories and generations, until the practice became woven into the fabric of reality itself. We're planting a forest, Maya sent, the metaphor crystallizing in her mind. We'll never see it reach maturity, but our students will plant more trees, and their students will plant more, until eventually there's a forest so vast and interconnected that even cosmic entities can't tear it down. I like that, Kale said. We're not trying to eliminate the threat. We're building something stronger than the threat, one conscious choice at a time. Below the cliffs, Maya saw a group of her newest students gathering for evening meditation, a practice that helped them strengthen their boundaries while deepening their connections. Ria was leading them, her teaching style more confident now. After 5 years of experience, Marcus stood nearby, ready to assist if anyone struggled. And beyond them, scattered across 43 territories, 500 other teachers were doing the same thing, teaching wolves to exist in the space between extremes, building the network one soul at a time. Do you ever regret it? Maya asked Kale suddenly, choosing to anchor the seal, existing primarily in the void while life goes on without you? The silence that followed was thoughtful rather than painful. I regret the manipulation, Kale finally replied. I regret trying to cage you instead of trusting you. I regret all the time we lost, because I was too afraid to be vulnerable. But the sacrifice itself? No, I don't regret that. Because it means something, Maya. I'm not just existing in the void. I'm holding the line between reality and entropy. That's purpose, not punishment. And you're not alone, Maya added, feeling the truth of it through their bond. You have me. You have the web. You experience life through all of us. Exactly, Kale agreed. I exist differently than I would have chosen, but I exist meaningfully. That's enough. Through the void aspect of her consciousness, Maya felt one of the watching entities shift, not attacking, just observing. They were all learning, she realized. The caged entities teaching patience, the watching ones studying their methods, and the 19 souls developing ever more refined ways to maintain balance. It was an evolutionary arms race, but one measured in centuries rather than moments. Maya, Sarah's consciousness, touched hers urgently. We have a situation at the Eastern School, a student whose bonds are corrupting despite following all the protocols. I think we might be seeing a new attack pattern. And there it was. The reminder that their work would never be finished, that new challenges would always emerge, that vigilance was eternal. "I'm coming," Maya sent, already preparing to shift more of her consciousness toward the physical realm. But before she moved, she took one last moment on the cliffs, looking out over territories that were learning to choose balance, thinking about all the students who would carry this work forward when she was gone, considering the network they'd built that would outlive them all. This is what love looks like, she thought. Not sending it through the bond, but holding it as a private truth. Not romance or grand gestures, but the choice to show up day after day, to teach and learn and grow, to hold the line between extremes, even when it's impossibly hard, to build something that matters knowing you'll never see its completion. Through their connection, Kale responded anyway, having felt the edges of her thought, and sometimes that love looks like a man in the void, and a woman between worlds, both choosing to exist divided so others can exist whole. Together, Maya sent. Always together, Kale confirmed. Even when we're apart. Maya turned from the cliffs and headed back toward the sanctuary, ready to face whatever new challenge awaited. Behind her, the sun finished setting, painting the sky in shades of silver and gold. And in the void between worlds, dozens of entities watched and waited and learned, while 19 souls stood guard and taught and chose balance again and again and again. The war for the soul of connection itself would never be won, but it would be fought, moment by moment, choice by choice, by every consciousness that learned what Maya Karen had discovered in a storm-soaked forest 5 years ago, that saving someone dangerous might doom you. That sacrifice comes in many forms, not all of them dramatic. That the greatest power isn't control but surrender to the right things. That love means maintaining boundaries while building bridges. That one person can't change everything, but networks of conscious beings can change anything. And that sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is keep choosing connection even when consumption and isolation would be so much easier. The sanctuary of the silver flame would endure, the network would expand, the teachings would spread, and somewhere in the void, a dire wolf king who'd learned to be vulnerable would stand eternal guard, while the woman he loved built forests in the physical world. Together, apart, always choosing balance. Because that's what guardians do. Epilogue. 10 years later. The young wolf approached the sanctuary gates with trembling hands and a heart full of hope she was afraid to trust. She'd been exiled from her pack 6 months ago for forming bonds too quickly, too intensely, for loving too much, and losing herself in others, until she didn't know where she ended, and they began. She was broken, dangerous, cursed, or so they'd told her, but she'd heard rumors, stories about a school where broken wolves learned to transform wounds into wisdom, where a healer who'd once destroyed the one she loved now taught thousands how to love without destroying. "Can you help me?" the young wolf asked the teacher who greeted her, a woman with kind eyes and silver flame dancing around her fingertips. The teacher smiled. "That depends. Are you willing to learn that connection without boundaries becomes consumption? That love without autonomy becomes possession? That the answer isn't isolation but conscious, boundaried, moment-by-moment choice?" "I don't understand what that means," the young wolf admitted. "You will," the teacher promised. "We all do eventually. Welcome to the sanctuary of the silver flame. Welcome to the place where broken wolves learn to fly." And somewhere between worlds, 19 souls smiled and chose balance one more time.
The story continues in After the Corruptor, a full novel set 10 years later, where Maya faces an entity that corrupts understanding itself. Link in the description if you want more, but mostly, thank you for being here.
But the story of connection's war against corruption and isolation, that's eternal. And somewhere in your own life, in your own relationships, the same choice awaits. Will you choose isolation when connection gets hard? Will you choose consumption when boundaries feel limiting? Or will you choose the brave, difficult, beautiful space between, where consciousness actually thrives? That choice is yours. Always has been. Always will be. Now go choose balance. The guardians are watching.